The real things, longbows. This is what you've laboured so hard to try and make. You need certain equipment with bows, and that equipment has stayed the same throughout history. First of all, as you pull the string, you're always going to need something here to protect your fingers. It's called a finger tab. It's a simple piece of leather. As we fire a bow, the string hits the inside of the arm, and after a couple of goes of that, it makes a real mark there and hurts. So you need a bracer. These were just pieces of leather or slate tied around the arm, so the bowstring would slap against them. Bracers, tabs, good bow, and you're all set up.
Well, what we've got here is your longbow. It's a very simple weapon, made famous during the 100 Years' War, the 14th and the 15th century. It's a very simple thing. It's the heart and the sapwood, the inside and the outside of the yew tree from the tree trunk. The string, it's just linen string, piece of cow horn on each end, and yet you have a weapon that can shoot one of these well over 300 paces. But look at the arrow. It has a barbed point. It's called a broadhead. Once it's inside your body, you can't pull it out. The arrow shaft, wooden, it's from the ash. Goose feathers. These are called the fletchings. In fact, the man who makes the bow is called the bowyer. The man who makes the arrow, the fletcher. The man who makes the arrow point, the arrow smith. The man who makes the string fellow. It's all a family business. But once you put the whole thing together, you've got a murder weapon. This is what makes it so deadly. You can shoot fast. The wounds at the other end, incredibly painful. Let me show you how simple it is. You put the arrow on, you look at the target, you bring him back and simply let him go. You had to train by law, at least from the age of 7. You'd shoot for 2 hours after church every Sunday. It changes your muscle shape. Your one shoulder on the right thickens, your right forearm becomes stronger. He would stand there, pouring the arrows down until he felt as if his arms were breaking. The thing about it is, because you train so much, you don't actually look down the arrow. You're looking at the target all of the time. You fix yourself on to that man. Fast, accurate, and under power. But it was all down to simply this: being able to look at your enemy and put him down.
You can see this is one of the arrows we found here. It has a long, very sharp tip, and it might have been a field arrow, even a practice arrow, but it was sharp enough and heavy enough to have been able to pierce some of the less sturdy armor that was primarily in use for the first couple of 100 years, 300 years of the warbow's main battlefield use. And another one is a bodkin, which had a bit more armor piercing capability, heavier tip, blunter but stronger with sharper edges on sharper blades. Here's one that's called a forker, and this was mainly a hunting arrow, it seems. It was used to slice the neck of birds or their wing feathers, or even it could be used to bring down larger animals by shearing tendons off if they were a good enough shot for that. Here's another one that might be one that, according to our senior curator, Bly Straub, this one might have been a 9th to 11th century design. We don't know why it was here, although we know they were using some of the older weapons that were given to them by the crown. Here's another one that would be an ideal war arrowhead, because you can see once it enters the body, trying to pull it out is going to rip flesh and tendons and veins and arteries. So that would be a very effective.
The usual arrowhead for warfare was this: the broadhead, wide and flat. Now this could only puncture mail at close range, but if it hit the flesh, it would slash a wide and deep wound. This head is long and thin. This was the one to use against mail. Now, I'm not taking any chances today, so I'm wearing full plate over the mail armour. And when plate came along, this arrow was introduced with a simple bodkin point that could puncture armour.
Every arrow had to count. A single arrow is a complex, carefully crafted and expensive missile. At Crécy, the English would be up against the full might of the French armoured cavalry. Exaggerated how much faster, especially with something like a belt and claw. So I'm going to give you 30 seconds. I think that last 30 seconds with a big onrush of knights is the critical time when you're under major pressure. I'll say go start with an arrow and a bolt in your hand, and then I'll give you 30 seconds and stop when I say stop. Stand by and go. The longbowman has his arrows in the ground by his side. This means they're quick to get at, much quicker than taking them from a quiver. And what's more, they're contaminated with bacteria, making any wounds more likely to be infected. The crossbowman is behind a large shield called a pavise. It gives him cover while he bends down to load his weapon. Stop! So, Gordon, you got 9 off. You got 4 off. But it was hard work. You were whizzing,
Very hard work, yes.
But you got 4 off, which is 8 crossbow bolts in a minute. I mean, that's faster than anyone's ever suggested before. The longbow could shoot twice as fast and more than twice as far. But at close range, the crossbow was deadly. To get an idea of the consequences of an arrow storm, I've had these life-size targets made. Gentlemen, you can see these targets ahead of you there, representing knights on horses at different distances. So what we want to do is see how well you can hit them, changing the range as we go. We need a little bit of military urgency with this, as if it's in a battle situation. So don't fuss too much about aiming, but the result is important. Knock! Draw! Loose! At 100 meters, fewer arrows hit home. They're coming, they're coming! Change range! Change range! But at close range, it's a different story. Well, he's not very well, is he? He's really taken a lot of hits. But, you know, I don't think as many of these hits are as deadly as they look. There's some in the shield, some have missed him over the neck, there's one in his lance. The ones that really count are down here. These ones in his legs, that would bring a horse down instantly. It's not fleshy, that's going to drop the horse. Ones like this in the flank, I'm not sure how much damage that would do. But it is a very sobering thought to see how quickly a knight and horse can become a pincushion at close range. As the first great French charge swept up the hill at Crécy, there was little doubt the experienced English archers were aiming for the horses. They were by far the softer targets. The King of France himself is recorded as having 2 horses killed beneath him. Our tests have shown that the knights in their armour were much better protected. They were only really vulnerable at close range, as the arrows hit home at over 140 miles an hour. But once the mounted knights were unhorsed, their formation broken, they were easy prey. How effective would their arrows be against these steel-clad knights? How much punch does an arrow need to penetrate armour? To find out, I've come to the ballistics test site at the Royal Military College of Science, Shrivenham. It's where the British Army still tests its small arms today. I've invited champion bowman Mark Stretton to come along. It takes 150 pounds power to draw his bow fully, which is at the extreme top end of the sort of bows used at Crécy.
Until the later Middle Ages, the archer was the most despised man on the battlefield.
But this doesn't make sense. Surely the value of this weapon is obvious. It's an absolute killer. Or is it? I want to show you 2 things. The first is my bicep. Now, I'm very proud of it. I think it's absolutely magnificent. But a medieval archer would laugh at that. The second thing is my suitcases. Now, this one here weighs 100 pounds. And this one weighs 50 pounds. And I can barely lift them up. The first-class warbow had a drawing strength of 150 pounds. That's about 50 pounds push with the left hand and 100 pounds pull with the right. Except, of course, this is only a 30-pound bow. If it was actually 150 pounds, I couldn't even draw it, let alone shoot it. Now, you would need a first-class archer of great stamina, great strength, and who had trained all his life. Only the English longbowman came anywhere near that ideal, and he was the exception.
England's archers, in fact, were the elite among the bowmen of the Middle Ages. They were so good because the English developed a culture of archery, in which young boys learned and practiced with powerful longbows from the time they could walk. Known for their strength and accuracy, the longbowmen of England became feared on the battlefield.
On the firing range, a Doppler radar records the exact speed the arrow is travelling, precisely measuring the rate at which it decelerates.
Excellent result.
You got a reading?
We have.
Fantastic. My God,
It's
wavy
very
lines.
good. It's very
What
good.
does that mean?
Well, we got from the bow here. We're going off at around about 52 meters a second, and right up here after 800 milliseconds, we're going down to 42 meters a second. So we're actually losing quite a lot of velocity.
So it's decelerating,
It's decelerating
really quite quickly.
Yeah.
But how significantly does this rapid loss of speed affect the arrow's ability to punch through armour? Here we are back at the laboratory, and what we're going to try and do now is find out what this arrow would have done to a piece of armour. It's munition quality, that's to say it's steel, but not specially hardened steel. And we're going to be able to shoot the arrow from an air cannon, very controlled conditions. The cannon's been calibrated so we can replicate different velocities and therefore replicate the arrow being shot at different ranges. We'll start at the furthest range and find out what this will do. Our first shot is equivalent to a range of about 80 meters.
Yeah. 3, 2, 1, go.
It's made a dent, but I don't think that's penetrated. It's bounced out. The second shot is equivalent to only 30 meters away. It's just punctured the armor, and at most would have only bruised the knight. The third shot is going to be equivalent to a range of just 20 meters. Here, the knights were almost on top of the archers. It's a significantly bigger hole.
Oh, yes. Yes, that's done a lot more damage.
Look at that. It's really gone through. Look at that. Yeah, it's gone past the shoulder and gone right in there.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's at close range. That's 20 meters.
There we go.
And it's gone into the accaton. This has really made a difference in springing the arrow out. But the arrow has gone in there. It's penetrated deep. That's one very ill man. These tests suggest that it was only at close range that an arrow could be relied on to penetrate the armour of an advancing French knight. Science, we put our breastplate to the test. Here's the breastplate we've had specially made and specially hardened and toughened, just the sort of thing they might have been wearing at Verneuil. So let's see how this will stand up to the power of the longbow.
Three, 2, 1.
The breastplate has been struck at 140 miles an hour to replicate an archer shooting within the killing zone, just 20 meters away. Goodness, look at this. There is some penetration. Look at that. See the hole, it's penetrated, it's gone through. But look what it's done to the arrowhead. It's absolutely flattened it. That's absolutely blunt. But what of the padded coat underneath? I don't think there's a mark on here at all. The man hasn't even received a scratch. If you were an archer at Verneuil, then you would see your arrows sticking out of the Lombard breastplates, but the men still sitting tall in the saddle. It would have made your blood run cold.
The longbow is also impressive, but it doesn't make quite the same inroads as the Yumi. Almost 10 inches into the gel for the longbow versus 12 for the Yumi, but both shots would clearly have been fatal.